Rejected Omega was asked to dance at Alpha King's coronation as a joke, but he fell in love. She arrived wearing the dress they expected her to wear in shame, the outcast, the worthless Omega. They invited her to humiliate her in front of the entire kingdom. But when the Alpha King took her hand, the laughter died. One touch, one dance, and the air shifted. The bond between them was undeniable, dangerous even. A joke meant to break her had just shaken the throne. Now, whispers of her bloodline threatened to unravel everything. Her power was supposed to be extinct, her love forbidden. But she may be the only one who can save them all. If their bond could start a war, will he risk everything to protect the one girl no one ever believed in? This channel isn't just about stories. It's about remembering what still holds value: empathy, truth, and the courage to care. The autumn wind rattled the windows of Kira's small cottage as she stared at the ornate invitation in her trembling hands. The thick parchment felt heavy, its golden lettering catching the dim afternoon light. You are cordially invited to attend the coronation of Alpha King Marcus. 3 pack members had delivered it earlier, their mocking laughter still ringing in her ears. Even the Omega reject gets an invitation, one had sneered, while another added, "Wonder if she'll show up in rags?" Kira's throat tightened as she traced the embossed wolf symbol at the top of the invitation. 5 years of isolation since being cast out as a defective Omega had taught her to expect cruelty, but this elaborate attempt to humiliate her still stung. She set the invitation on her worn kitchen table and wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her racing heart. The smart thing would be to ignore it, to continue her quiet existence doing laundry and cleaning for the humans in the nearby town, who didn't know what she was, who didn't care that she couldn't shift into wolf form like every other werewolf. But something inside her rebelled at the thought of hiding away this time. "No," she whispered to herself, straightening her spine. "I won't let them win. Not again." With determined steps, she went to the old cookie tin where she kept her savings, crumpled bills earned from countless hours of backbreaking work. She counted out nearly all of it, leaving just enough for next week's groceries. It would have to be enough. The next morning, she made the long walk into town, her hood pulled up against curious stares. The dress shop's bell chimed as she entered, and the elderly human owner smiled warmly. "How can I help you, dear?" "I need a dress," Kira said softly. "Something elegant, but simple." After trying on several options, she found it. A floor-length gown in deep midnight blue. No elaborate beading or flashy details, but the fabric draped beautifully, and the color made her pale skin glow. It was more than she'd ever spent on clothing, but as she stood in the fitting room, she felt something she hadn't in years: hope. Back home, Kira spent hours practicing walking in the secondhand heels she'd found at the thrift store. She studied proper etiquette online, memorizing which fork to use and how to curtsy. Every evening after finishing her work, she would practice until her feet ached. "Shoulders back," she reminded herself, pacing her small living room. "Chin up. You have as much right to be there as anyone." The words felt false at first, like trying to speak a foreign language. But slowly, with each passing day, they began to sink in. The broken, frightened Omega was still there, but something else was emerging too, someone who refused to be ashamed any longer. On the evening before the coronation, Kira stood before her full-length mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly, making her look elegant rather than awkward. She'd managed to tame her usually unruly dark hair into soft waves, and a touch of borrowed makeup enhanced her delicate features. But it was her eyes that showed the biggest change. Instead of the usual fear and apology, there was a quiet determination in their green depths. She might not be able to shift, might not have a pack or status or power, but she was done apologizing for existing. "I am Kira," she whispered to her reflection, voice growing stronger with each word. "I am a daughter of the Lumina bloodline, even if I'm the last, and I belong in this world as much as any of them." Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the invitation from her dresser. Tomorrow, she would walk into that coronation hall with her head held high. Let them laugh, let them stare. She would show them all that an Omega reject could have dignity, could have grace. For the first time since being cast out, Kira felt not just determination, but a flicker of something dangerous: defiance. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. But at least this time, she was choosing her own path. In the mirror, a transformed woman looked back at her, still wearing a simple dress, still bearing the scars of rejection, but standing tall with an inner strength that no amount of cruelty could diminish. She was ready to face whatever the coronation would bring. The Crystal Palace lived up to its name, its towering glass walls catching the last rays of sunset as Kira approached. Her heart thundered against her ribs as she joined the stream of elegantly dressed werewolves flowing through the grand entrance. Crystalline chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors, while delicate ice sculptures decorated every corner. Everywhere she looked, power and privilege dripped like honey. Alphas wore ceremonial robes trimmed with gold, their mates draped in jewels that could feed Kira for years. Betas moved with casual confidence, their status marked by silver emblems. Even the servants held themselves with more authority than she'd ever dared claim. "Is that the Moon Ridge reject?" The whisper carried clearly to her enhanced hearing, followed by poorly concealed snickers. Kira kept her chin up, though her hands trembled as she presented her invitation to the guard. He examined it with obvious suspicion, nostrils flaring to catch her scent. After an uncomfortable pause, he jerked his head toward the main hall. "Stay in the back," he growled. "Don't make trouble." The great hall took her breath away. Hundreds of crystal-cut windows soared toward a domed ceiling painted with scenes of werewolf history. Ornate thrones sat upon a raised dais, backed by massive tapestries depicting the major pack territories. The room already brimmed with werewolf nobility, their expensive perfumes and colognes almost masking their natural wolf scents. Kira found a spot near the back as instructed, trying to make herself invisible while still maintaining the proper posture she'd practiced. More whispers followed her movement. An Omega at a coronation? How dare she? Doesn't she know her place? I heard she can't even shift. She forced herself to breathe steadily, focusing on the intricate floor patterns instead of the cruel words. She belonged here. She had an invitation. She wouldn't run. A hush fell over the crowd as trumpets sounded. The massive doors at the front of the hall swung open, and Kira's world tilted on its axis. Darius Blackthorn entered with the fluid grace of an apex predator. His ceremonial robes were midnight black trimmed with silver, emphasizing broad shoulders and a warrior's build. But it was his presence that commanded attention, an aura of quiet authority that made even powerful alphas lower their eyes as he passed. Kira couldn't look away. She'd heard rumors of his tactical brilliance, how he'd earned the crown through merit rather than birthright. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of him. His face was all sharp angles and stern beauty, with eyes that seemed to search the crowd for something beyond the obvious displays of submission and respect. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of ancient words and formal rituals. Kira found herself holding her breath as Darius knelt to receive the crown. A surprisingly simple band of silver set with a single black diamond. When he rose as Alpha King, his power filled the room like a physical force, making her wolf instincts want to bare her throat despite her inability to shift. Their eyes met for the briefest moment across the crowded hall. Something electric shot through her body, making her gasp softly. Darius's expression flickered with what might have been surprise before his attention was pulled away by the High Elder completing the ceremony. When the formal coronation concluded, servants threw open the ballroom doors. The crowd began to flow toward the celebration, their excited chatter filling the air. Kira remained frozen, trying to understand what she'd felt in that split-second connection. She retreated to the shadows of a massive column, watching as couples swept across the dance floor and politicians maneuvered for the new king's attention. This was a world she'd never been allowed to join. A world of power, politics, and belonging. Yet for the first time, she didn't feel only bitter longing. Something else pulled at her, a strange awareness centered on the commanding figure of Darius Blackthorn. Even from across the room, she could sense his controlled power, the way he managed the delicate dance of pack politics with subtle skill. He accepted congratulations with grave courtesy, but his eyes still held that searching quality, as if seeking something or someone in the glittering crowd. Kira pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. She told herself she was imagining things, that a rejected Omega had no business feeling such an inexplicable connection to the most powerful alpha in the realm. Yet she couldn't deny the pull, couldn't ignore how her entire body seemed to hum with awareness of his presence. She stayed in her shadowed corner, observing the celebration while battling her own insecurities. Every instinct screamed that she didn't belong in this world of power and privilege. But that momentary connection lingered in her mind, making her wonder if perhaps there was more to her place in the werewolf world than anyone had ever suspected. The ballroom swirled with activity as Darius Blackthorn navigated the endless stream of congratulations and political maneuvering. He accepted each bow and courtesy with practiced grace, though his inner wolf grew restless with all the forced pleasantries. The Northern Pack seemed particularly eager to secure trade agreements, Marcus murmured at his side, ever the vigilant advisor. Though I suspect their real interest lies in their unmarried daughters. Darius gave a slight nod, but his attention had once again drifted to the lone figure standing in the shadows. The Omega from earlier. Something about her pulled at his senses, making it difficult to focus on the tedious diplomatic dance around him. Ah, Marcus followed his gaze, a calculating gleam entering his eyes. The Moon Ridge reject. They say she can't even shift. Quite the scandal when it was discovered. His thin lips curved into a smile. Actually, Your Majesty, approaching her might prove entertaining for the court. A display of royal benevolence toward even the lowest among us. The nobles would appreciate the joke. Darius considered the suggestion. As the new Alpha King, every action carried weight. A public gesture of mock kindness would reinforce both his power and the natural order of things. Yet something about the way the Omega held herself, proud despite her isolation, gave him pause. Still, appearances must be maintained. He moved through the crowd with deliberate steps, watching as wolves parted before him and whispers rippled in his wake. The Omega tensed as he approached, though she kept her chin lifted in a show of dignity that impressed him despite himself. Up close, her simple dress couldn't hide a natural grace, and her eyes held an intelligence that belied her low status. Darius extended his hand with calculated indifference. Would you honor your king with a dance? The court held its collective breath, anticipating her humiliation. But when her trembling fingers met his, an electric shock raced through his entire body. His wolf surged forward with a force that nearly brought him to his knees. Mate! The recognition blazed between them, impossible yet undeniable. He saw the same stunned realization flash across her face, felt her pulse spike beneath his fingers. Without conscious thought, his arm slid around her waist, pulling her closer than protocol allowed. The orchestra began a waltz, and they moved together as if they had danced 1,000 times before. Each point of contact between them sparked with awareness. Her scent, subtle notes of rain and moonflowers, filled his lungs, making his wolf howl with joy at finding what they'd never known they were missing. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered, her voice shaking. They said I was broken. What's your name? He kept his tone low, meant only for her ears, despite the hundreds of eyes watching their every move. Kira? Kira! The name felt right on his tongue. He tightened his hold as they turned, supporting her through a complex step. You're not broken. The watching crowd had fallen silent, the anticipated entertainment transforming into something else entirely. No one could miss the connection crackling between their newly crowned king and the supposedly worthless Omega. Marcus stood at the edge of the dance floor, his usually composed face showing clear shock. Darius barely noticed them. His entire world had narrowed to the woman in his arms, her warmth, her grace, the way she fit against him as if designed by fate itself. Each turn brought fresh waves of recognition, the mate bond strengthening with every shared breath. They're all staring, Kira murmured, though she moved with increasing confidence as the dance continued. Let them! He met the judgmental gazes of his court with a look that dared anyone to question what was happening. He was Alpha King. If fate had chosen to give him an Omega mate, then so be it. The music drew to a close, but Darius found himself reluctant to release her. Protocol demanded they part, return to their respective places in the hierarchy. But the mate bond hummed between them, making such separation feel impossible. Before he could decide how to proceed, a commotion near the entrance shattered the moment. Guards were shouting, and the crowd began to shift uneasily. Darius kept his hand on Kira's waist as Marcus hurried toward them, his face grave. The music faded, and reality crashed back like a cold wave. The ballroom hummed with whispers, hundreds of eyes fixed on the newly crowned Alpha King still holding an Omega in his arms. Darius forced himself to step back, though every instinct screamed to keep Kira close. His face remained impassive, years of political training serving him well, despite the chaos in his heart. "Thank you for the dance," he said formally, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Then softer, meant only for her. "The palace gardens? Eastern Gate. 1 hour." He turned away before she could respond, immediately surrounded by nobles demanding his attention. The next 60 minutes passed in a blur of diplomatic small talk and calculated responses, but his awareness never left Kira. He tracked her movement through the crowd by scent alone, noting when she slipped quietly from the ballroom. When he finally escaped to the gardens, the full moon illuminated the path to where Kira waited by an ancient oak tree. She'd removed her dancing slippers, standing barefoot in the grass as if drawing strength from the earth itself. The sight made his wolf rumble with approval. "I wasn't sure you'd really come," she said softly as he approached. "I couldn't stay away if I tried." The admission fell from his lips before he could stop it. Here, away from prying eyes, he didn't have to be the controlled Alpha King. "What is this between us? I've never felt anything like it." "The mate bond." Kira wrapped her arms around herself. "I never thought. They always said I was defective, broken." "Tell me." He stepped closer, drawn by the pain in her voice. "I can't shift." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I've never been able to. The Moonridge Pack cast me out when they discovered it. Said an Omega who couldn't even transform wasn't worth the resources to keep." She laughed bitterly. "They were right about one thing. I am an Omega. I can feel the pack bonds, sense emotions, I just can't change." Darius reached for her hand, unable to resist the urge to comfort. The mate bond flared at the contact, warm and right. "You're not broken, Kira. Different maybe, but I can feel your strength." "A king can't mate with a rejected Omega?" Her fingers tightened on his. "The political fallout?" "Your Majesty?" Marcus's voice cut through the night, making them both jump. The advisor emerged from the shadows, his expression grave. "A word, if I may." Darius reluctantly released Kira's hand. "Speak." "The Northern Alphas are already using this in display as evidence of weakness. They claim a king who would dance with an Omega lacks the strength to rule." Marcus's eyes flickered to Kira. "There are whispers of challenge." The words hung heavy in the moonlit garden. Darius felt his wolf rise, bristling at the threat to both his authority and his mate. But Marcus wasn't wrong. The political reality couldn't be ignored. "I won't apologize for following the mate bond," Darius said firmly, "but I understand the need for discretion." He turned to Kira, who watched them with resigned understanding in her eyes. "This isn't a rejection. I need to see you again." "The old library tower," Marcus suggested reluctantly. "It's private, easily secured. I can arrange access without drawing attention." Kira nodded slowly. "I could come in through the city, take different routes. No one pays attention to an Omega doing errands." 3 days, Darius said. "Give me 3 days to handle the immediate political fires, then meet me there at moonrise." He wanted to pull her close, to seal the promise with a kiss, but Marcus's presence reminded him of the need for caution. "I'll be there." Kira stepped back, moonlight silvering her hair. "Be careful, my king. Don't let me become your downfall." "You're not my downfall," he replied softly. You're my destiny." She slipped away into the night, leaving Darius to face Marcus's concerned frown. But he couldn't bring himself to regret a moment of it. The mate bond hummed in his chest, a warm reminder that for the first time in his life, duty wasn't the only force driving him forward. He had found his mate against all odds. Now he just had to find a way to keep her without losing his kingdom in the process. Moonlight streamed through the library tower's dusty windows as Kira traced her fingers along ancient leather-bound books. These secret meetings had become her sanctuary over the past 3 weeks, each moment with Darius feeling more precious than the last. "You're different tonight," Darius observed, watching her from his usual spot near the window. "More confident." Kira smiled, remembering how she'd stood up to a merchant that morning who tried to cheat her. "I suppose I am. It's easier to believe in yourself when someone else does first." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "You've always had this strength. You just needed to remember it." The mate bond hummed between them, warm and reassuring. These stolen hours had changed them both. Where Kira had found her voice, Darius had discovered a gentler side to his authority. Just yesterday, she'd watched from the market square as he'd stopped his procession to help an elderly woman who dropped her groceries. The crowd's surprise had quickly turned to approval. Their Alpha King wasn't just powerful, but kind. "The kitchen staff is gossiping about you," Kira said, settling into his embrace. "They say you've been smiling more. One of the cooks swears she heard you humming." Darius chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Marcus mentioned something similar. Apparently, I'm less intimidating in council meetings, though he did raise an eyebrow at how often I'm inspecting the library archives." "Are we being too careless?" Kira pulled back slightly, worry creasing her brow. "No," he said firmly. "We're being careful, and I won't apologize for being happier. The pack responds to their alpha's energy. My improved mood has actually made negotiations smoother." Kira nodded, but her response was interrupted by a sudden wave of dizziness. Strange images flashed through her mind, ancient wolves running under a blood moon, their fur glowing with an inner light. A familiar power thrummed through her veins, wild and untamed. "Kira?" Darius's concerned voice brought her back to the present. She found herself gripping his arms for support. "The dreams are getting stronger," she whispered. "Not just at night now. I see wolves, different from any I've known. They shine from within, like they're made of moonlight. And when I wake up, I feel something, a power I don't understand." Darius guided her to a nearby chair, his expression thoughtful. "How long has this been happening?" "The dream started a week ago, but today was the first time I felt it while awake." She looked up at him. "I know it sounds crazy." "No," he said slowly. "It sounds like old magic, the kind that runs in ancient bloodlines." He moved to one of the shelves, pulling out a heavy tome. The palace archives contain genealogies of every major werewolf line, including lost ones. Lost ones? Bloodlines thought to have died out generations ago. Some had unique abilities, powers beyond normal shifting. He set the book between them, dust puffing as he opened it. "Your inability to shift? What if it's not a weakness? What if it's because you're meant for something different?" Kira stared at the yellowed pages, her heart racing. "You think I might belong to one of these lines?" "I think," Darius said carefully, "that a woman who can sense emotions across distances and dreams of glowing wolves might have more remarkable ancestry than the Moonridge pack realized." The power stirred again, as if responding to his words. Kira pressed her palm to the ancient text, feeling a strange resonance. Where would we even start looking? "We start with what we know. You're an Omega with unique empathic abilities. You can't shift, but you have an unusually strong connection to pack bonds." He flipped through the pages with purpose. "And now these dreams of luminous wolves." Their heads bent together over the book, searching for answers. Hours passed as they explored histories of forgotten packs and legendary wolves. When the eastern sky began to lighten, they reluctantly prepared to part. "Same time tomorrow?" Kira asked, straightening her simple dress. Darius caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I wouldn't miss it. And Kira, whatever we discover about your heritage, know that you're already extraordinary to me. She left the tower as dawn broke, her heart full and her mind buzzing with possibilities. The dreams that had frightened her now felt like clues to a mystery she was finally ready to solve. With Darius by her side, even the impossible seemed within reach. In the deepest level of the palace archives, where ancient scrolls lay protected by magical wards, Darius hunched over a crumbling text. His fingers traced the faded illustration of wolves with fur that seemed to capture moonlight itself. The description beneath made his heart race. The lumina, blessed by the first moon, carry power beyond mere shifting. They sense emotions across great distances, move objects with thought alone, and possess the sacred ability to purify corrupted wolves. Their inability to take wolf form marks them as vessels of pure magic. Darius's mind flashed to Kira. Her unexplained abilities, the strange dreams, her connection to others' emotions. Everything aligned perfectly with the ancient accounts. The last recorded lumina had vanished over 2 centuries ago, presumably wiped out by those who feared their power. My king! The urgent voice of his beta commander echoed through the archives. Marcus burst through the heavy doors, his usual composure shattered. We're under attack! Darius straightened immediately, pushing the revelations about Kira aside. Where? 3 locations simultaneously. The northern forest border, the eastern ridge, and the southern plains. Reports are still coming in, but at least 20 casualties already. Coordinated strikes, Darius growled, his alpha authority filling the room. This is no random assault. Show me the reports. As they hurried through the palace corridors, Marcus detailed the attacks. Each target was a strategic checkpoint, vital for defending larger territories. The attacking forces had struck with precision, suggesting inside knowledge of patrol schedules. They reached the war room, where maps and urgent messages covered the central table. Darius studied the attack patterns, his tactical mind already forming connections. These strikes aren't meant to gain territory. They're testing our response capabilities, probing for weaknesses. My thoughts exactly, a smooth voice interjected. Vance Sterling stepped from the shadows, his perfectly tailored suit and practiced smile a stark contrast to the crisis atmosphere. Which is why I came as soon as I heard, offering my pack's full support. Darius kept his expression neutral, though his wolf bristled at Sterling's presence. The rival alpha had opposed his ascension to the throne, hiding his ambition behind diplomatic smiles. Your concern is noted, Sterling, though I wonder how you arrived so quickly after attacks that happened less than an hour ago. News travels fast among those who care about the kingdom's welfare, Sterling replied, his smile never wavering. Especially in these uncertain times, with such unconventional leadership decisions being made. The subtle dig confirmed Darius's suspicions. Sterling had spies in the palace. How else could he know about the time Darius spent with Kira? The rival alpha was gathering ammunition, waiting for any sign of weakness to challenge his rule. Marcus, deploy our elite squads to reinforce the attacked positions, Darius commanded. I want our strongest warriors visible on those borders. Sterling, since you're so eager to help, your pack can assist with civilian evacuations, under my commander's supervision, of course. Sterling's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Being relegated to evacuation duty was a calculated insult, but he couldn't refuse without revealing his true intentions. Of course, my king, whatever serves the kingdom best. As orders were dispatched and warriors mobilized, Darius's thoughts returned to the Lumina revelation. If anyone discovered Kira's true heritage, especially Sterling, she would become either a target or a tool in their political machinations. The last Lumina could tip the balance of power in the kingdom, which meant keeping her safe was more crucial than ever. One more thing, Sterling said as he turned to leave. There are whispers about you spending considerable time in the archives lately. Researching ancient bloodlines, perhaps? Such fascinating history we have. The casual observation carried clear threat. Sterling was watching, gathering intelligence, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Darius met his gaze steadily. The past holds many lessons for those wise enough to learn from them, including what happens to those who mistake patience for weakness. After Sterling departed, Marcus approached cautiously. He knows something about the Omega girl, doesn't he? He suspects, Darius corrected, his voice hard. But he won't act without proof. Double the guards on the archive entrance. No one accesses the ancient text without my direct approval. And the attacks? Respond with overwhelming force. Show everyone that challenging my rule carries consequences. Darius stared at the map, plotting strategies while his heart ached to warn Kira of the growing danger. But watch for secondary strikes. These attacks feel like a distraction. We need to discover what they're really after. The war room buzzed with activity as commanders arrived for briefings. Darius immersed himself in battle plans and defense strategies, but one thought remained constant. He had to protect Kira. Not just because she was his mate, but because her newly discovered heritage made her possibly the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. And if Sterling ever learned the truth about the last Lumina, no border defense would be strong enough to stop what would follow. The war room's atmosphere grew heavier with each new report. Maps scattered across the massive oak table showed red markers multiplying like blood drops across the territories. Darius stood at the head of the table, his shoulders tense as he listened to his commander's latest update. "The attacks are unlike anything we've seen before, my king," the battle-worn beta reported, his voice grave. "These wolves, they're different. Our strongest fighters strike them down, but they keep coming. It's as if they don't feel pain." Murmurs rippled through the assembled Alpha leaders. Darius studied the map intently, noting the pattern of attacks spreading like a dark web across his kingdom. "Different how?" Their eyes glow red instead of the natural gold, and they fight with unnatural strength, another commander added. "Standard pack defenses that should repel enemy wolves have no effect. It's like they're corrupted somehow." The word corrupted stirred something in Darius's memory. The ancient texts about the Lumina spoke of their power to purify corrupted wolves. Before he could pursue that thought, Vance Sterling's smooth voice cut through the tension. "Perhaps if our king wasn't so distracted lately, we might have anticipated these threats." Sterling's words dripped with false concern as he rose from his seat. "The palace staff whispers of your frequent disappearances, my king. Long hours spent in the archives instead of attending to border defenses. One might question where your true priorities lie." The other alphas shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Darius and Sterling. The challenge in Sterling's words was clear, even beneath the veneer of respectful concern. Darius straightened to his full height, his alpha presence filling the room like a gathering storm. "You question my dedication to this kingdom, Sterling." "I merely give voice to growing concerns," Sterling replied with a slight bow. "In these dangerous times, we need a leader fully focused on protecting our people, not one whose attention might be divided." The trap was perfectly laid. Deny the accusations too strongly and he'd appear defensive. Ignore them, and he'd seem weak. Darius could feel the other alphas watching, weighing, judging. "You want proof of my commitment?" Darius's voice carried the weight of his authority. "I will personally lead our forces against these attacks. I'll show these corrupted wolves and anyone who would threaten our kingdom exactly how focused their king can be." The declaration had its intended effect. The assembled alphas straightened, pride and loyalty kindling in their eyes. Even Sterling couldn't hide his momentary surprise. He hadn't expected such a bold move. But as the War Council continued planning their military response, Darius's thoughts turned to Kira. Leading the campaign meant leaving her vulnerable, especially with Sterling's spies clearly watching for any sign of her. The thought of her alone, unprotected, made his wolf howl in protest. That night, in their secret meeting place in the palace gardens, Kira immediately sensed his turmoil. "Something's wrong," she said, reaching for his hand. "I can feel it." Darius pulled her close, breathing in her scent like it might be the last time. "The attacks are worse than we thought. I have to lead our forces personally." "You're leaving?" It wasn't a question. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes showed understanding. I don't have a choice. Sterling's already using our relationship to question my leadership, even though he doesn't know the full truth about us. Kira stepped back, her chin lifting with newfound confidence, the strength he'd helped her discover in herself. Then let me stand beside you openly. No more hiding. I'm your mate, your equal. Let me help you face these threats. No? The word came out sharper than he intended, his fear for her safety overwhelming his usual control. Sterling would use you as a weapon against me, and if anyone discovers what you truly are, the last of the Lumina. So I'm supposed to hide in the shadows while you fight? Watch you risk your life while I do nothing? Anger and hurt flashed in her eyes. I'm stronger than you think, Darius. Stop trying to protect me and let me protect you too. You don't understand the politics at play, he argued, running a hand through his hair in frustration. One wrong move, and Sterling could challenge my right to rule. If that happens, I can't protect anyone. And you don't understand that keeping me locked away like a secret shame only proves Sterling right, Kira shot back. How can you be a strong king if you're afraid to stand by your own mate? The words hung between them like physical barriers. Darius reached for her, but Kira stepped away, wrapping her arms around herself. Go, she said quietly. Go be the king they need, but remember, every time you hide me away, you're telling everyone that loving me makes you weak. Darius watched her walk away, his heart torn between his duty to his kingdom and his soul's need to run after her. For the first time since discovering their mate bond, he felt the distance between them growing into something that even love might not be able to bridge. The morning of Darius's departure dawned cold and gray. Kira paced in her small cottage, her emotions churning like storm clouds. The argument from their last meeting still echoed in her mind, making her hands shake as she tried to prepare her morning tea. Suddenly, the cup flew off the counter, smashing against the wall without her touching it. Kira stared at the shattered pieces, her heart racing. This wasn't the first time strange things had happened around her lately. Books falling from shelves, windows rattling during her nightmares. She'd blamed it on the wind, on coincidence. But now, a wave of dizziness hit her, and visions flooded her mind. Ancient wolves with glowing white fur standing against armies of corrupted dark creatures. Their eyes blazed with pure light as they pushed back the darkness with nothing but their will. The Lumina wolves, her ancestors. No, Kira whispered, pressing her palms against her temples. Not now. Please, not now. Outside her window, she caught a glimpse of Marcus, Darius's advisor, quickly ducking behind a tree. He'd been watching her, she realized. For how long? In the palace, Marcus hurried through the corridors, his mind racing with what he'd witnessed. The signs were unmistakable, the telekinetic abilities, the distinctive energy signature. Everything matched the ancient texts about the Lumina bloodline. As royal advisor, his duty was clear: report the presence of such a potentially dangerous force. But he'd also seen how Darius changed since meeting Kira. The young king had become more compassionate, more connected to his people. And now, with these border attacks, Marcus paused in his private study, pulling out a dusty tome. The pages fell open to an illustration of a Lumina wolf purifying a corrupted pack. The very power we might need, he murmured, making his decision. Meanwhile, in a shadowy corner of the palace, Vance Sterling met with his spies. Report, he commanded. The king has been sneaking out regularly, my lord, one spy said. Always at night, always to the same location. We found these in the garden. He handed over several long, dark hairs. They belong to a female, but we haven't identified her yet. Vance smiled coldly. Excellent. Continue watching. When Darius leaves for battle, whoever she is, she'll be vulnerable. That's when we'll discover who's been distracting our mighty king. The departure ceremony gathered the entire court in the palace courtyard. Darius stood proud in his battle armor, addressing his assembled forces. Kira watched from the shadows of a servant's entrance, her chest tight with fear and longing. As Darius spoke of duty and protection, another vision slammed into Kira. She saw corrupted wolves with red eyes, felt their wrongness like a physical pain. Her power surged in response, and the heavy wooden doors behind her groaned on their hinges. Marcus, standing nearby, noticed the disturbance. He moved quickly to block the view as several courtiers turned to look. "Breathe," he whispered to Kira. "Focus on my voice. Control it." She stared at him in shock, but his calm presence helped her push back the power threatening to burst free. The doors settled. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Long enough to know you're not a threat," he replied quietly. "But others might not see it that way. Be careful, there are eyes everywhere." As if to prove his point, one of Vance's men watched them intently from across the courtyard. Marcus stepped away casually, but the warning was clear. The horn sounded, signaling the army's departure. Darius mounted his warhorse, every inch the powerful Alpha King. For just a moment, his eyes found Kira in her hiding place. The mate bond hummed between them, full of unspoken words and regret. Then he was gone, leading his forces toward the border conflicts, leaving Kira standing alone as her newly awakened powers pulsed beneath her skin, like lightning seeking ground. In her cottage that night, Kira tried to sleep, but the visions came stronger than ever. She saw ancient battles, felt the surge of Lumina power that could heal or destroy. Objects around her room began to shake and float as her control slipped. "Please," she begged the empty air, "I don't know how to control this. I don't know what I am." But there was no one to answer, no one to help her understand these abilities emerging at the worst possible time. And somewhere in the darkness, Vance's spies drew ever closer to discovering her identity, while corrupted wolves threatened the borders and the man she loved rode out to face them without knowing the true power that could save them all slept within his mate. Kira jolted awake in her small palace quarters as another surge of power coursed through her body. The furniture around her trembled, and books flew off their shelves. She tried to steady her breathing, remembering Marcus's advice from the departure ceremony, but the energy inside her refused to be contained. "No, no, please," she whispered, watching in horror as cracks appeared in the walls. The very air seemed to vibrate with her power. A blinding white light emanated from her hands, and suddenly, everything exploded outward. Windows shattered, furniture splintered, and the stone walls crumbled partially. In the aftermath, Kira stood in the center of the destruction, shaking. Dawnlight filtered through the broken windows, illuminating the extent of the damage. She couldn't stay here. Someone would discover this, and questions would lead to her exposure. With trembling hands, she gathered her few belongings and slipped out into the palace corridors. She needed help, and there was only one person who seemed to understand what was happening to her. Marcus was in his study when she knocked frantically on his door. He took one look at her terrified face and ushered her inside, quickly securing the room. "I destroyed my quarters," Kira confessed, her voice breaking. "I can't control it anymore. These powers, they're getting stronger." Marcus's expression grew serious as he moved to a hidden panel in his bookshelf. "I've been waiting for this moment," he said, retrieving an ancient leather-bound book. "It's time you learned the truth about who you are." He opened the book to reveal detailed illustrations of wolves with pure white fur and glowing eyes, just like in her visions. "The Lumina weren't just another bloodline," Marcus explained, his voice low and reverent. "They were the peacekeepers of our world, blessed with abilities beyond ordinary werewolves. They could sense corruption, heal broken bonds, and maintain balance between packs." Kira traced the illustrations with trembling fingers. "What happened to them?" Marcus's face darkened. Fear happened. Their power was so great that some alphas began to see them as a threat to their authority. The Lumina could challenge an alpha's decisions if they sensed corruption or abuse of power. They couldn't be controlled or dominated like other wolves. He turned a page, revealing images of warfare and destruction. Over generations, they were systematically hunted down and eliminated. Those who survived went into hiding, suppressing their abilities to stay alive. "My parents," Kira whispered. "They must have known. That's why they taught me to hide, to make myself small." "Your inability to shift isn't a weakness," Marcus said firmly. "It's because your power manifests differently. The Lumina's true strength was never in their wolf form, but in their ability to maintain balance and peace." As they spoke, Vance Sterling's investigation was drawing closer to uncovering Kira's identity. His spies had traced the mysterious female's movements to the servants' quarters, and the recent destruction of one set of rooms had caught their attention. "The occupant disappeared this morning," a spy reported to Vance. "A young woman working as a kitchen maid. She arrived shortly after the coronation." Vance's eyes narrowed. Find her. Someone who caught the king's attention must be more than a simple servant. Meanwhile, at the border, Darius led his forces against another wave of attacks. But something about these battles felt wrong. The enemy wolves moved with unnatural coordination, striking at specific weaknesses in their defenses as if guided by someone who knew their strategies intimately. During a brief respite between attacks, Darius consulted with his commanders. "These aren't random raids," he concluded, studying the pattern of attacks. "The enemy knows our patrol schedules, our defensive formations, even our emergency protocols. Someone with access to our military plans is controlling these wolves." Back in Marcus's study, Kira practiced controlling her abilities under his guidance. Small objects floated around her, as she learned to channel her power with precision rather than raw emotion. The Lumina's greatest strength was their connection to the essence of wolfkind, Marcus explained. They could sense corruption and cleanse it, heal broken pack bonds, even calm the most savage wolf rage. But such power requires balance and control. "Is that why I've been seeing visions?" Kira asked, carefully setting the objects down. "Of ancient battles and corrupted wolves?" Marcus nodded gravely. "Your powers are awakening because they're needed. These attacks at the border, I fear they're connected to something darker, something the Lumina were meant to protect against." Vance Sterling's calculated footsteps echoed through the palace garden as he approached Kira. She had been practicing controlling her abilities in what she thought was a secluded spot, not realizing she'd been watched. The floating leaves around her dropped instantly as she sensed his presence. "The mysterious kitchen maid who caught our king's attention," Vance said smoothly, his alpha presence filling the space between them. "Or should I say, the last surviving Lumina." Kira's heart stopped. She took an instinctive step backward, but Vance raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to harm you," he said. "I'm here to show you the consequences of your relationship with Darius." He produced a stack of reports, letting them fall at her feet. Maps marked with attack locations, lists of casualties, and intelligence briefings scattered across the ground. These border attacks, they're not random. They're orchestrated by a coalition of rival alphas who believe Darius has become weak. Vance's voice carried a false note of concern. "They say an alpha king who spends his nights meeting secretly with an omega cannot be trusted to maintain order." Kira's hands trembled as she picked up one of the reports. "You're lying." "Am I?" Vance gestured to the documents. 23 dead in the Northern Territory, 15 wounded in the Eastern Forests, all because some alphas believe their king has lost his way. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And now that they know you're Lumina, the violence will only escalate. Your kind was eliminated for a reason. You threatened the natural order." "The natural order?" Kira's voice shook with anger. "You mean the hierarchy that keeps wolves like me powerless?" "The hierarchy that keeps peace," Vance corrected. "Look at these reports again. Every attack targets innocent pack members, families, children, those who can't defend themselves. They will continue dying until Darius proves his strength by choosing duty over love." The truth of his words hit Kira like a physical blow. She had seen the exhaustion in Darius's eyes when he left for battle, the weight of his responsibilities crushing him while he tried to protect their secret. "What do you want from me?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Leave," Vance said simply. "Disappear completely. No contact, no goodbyes. Let Darius focus on being the king his people need." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Or stay and watch as more innocent blood is spilled in your name." Kira closed her eyes, feeling the power of her Lumina heritage coursing through her veins. The variability that made her special also made her dangerous to everything Darius had built. How do I know the attacks will stop if I leave? Because I'll personally ensure the coalition stands down. Vance's smile didn't reach his eyes. After all, we only want what's best for the kingdom. Kira spent the next hour in her partially repaired quarters, tears falling onto the paper as she wrote her letter to Darius. Every word felt like a knife in her heart. "My dearest Darius," she wrote, "by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Our love, as beautiful and real as it is, has become a weapon used against your kingdom. I cannot bear the thought of more innocent lives lost because of us. You must be the king your people need, strong, undistracted, devoted to duty above all else. Please don't look for me. Know that I love you enough to let you go, and that this choice, though it breaks my heart, is the only way to protect our people. Forever yours, Kira." She sealed the letter with trembling hands and placed it where Marcus would find it after she'd gone. As she gathered her few belongings, she felt her Lumina powers surge with her grief, but for the first time, she controlled them perfectly. Her pain had taught her the hardest lesson about power. Sometimes its greatest expression was in choosing not to use it. Under the cover of night, Kira slipped away from the palace that had briefly shown her what belonging felt like. She left no trace of her passing, no hint of where she might go. The only evidence she had ever existed was a letter written in tears and the invisible threads of a mate bond that would never be fulfilled. Behind her, the palace lights glowed steadily, a reminder of the duty and responsibility she was protecting by walking away. Each step felt like walking through fire, but she forced herself forward, knowing that her sacrifice would keep others safe. The night wrapped around her like a cloak, hiding the tears that fell freely as she disappeared into the darkness. Darius burst through the palace doors, his boots echoing against marble floors still stained with mud from the border territories. The sudden cease of attacks had allowed him to return earlier than planned, his heart racing with an inexplicable sense of dread. "Where is she?" he demanded, finding Marcus waiting in the entrance hall with an uncharacteristically grim expression. Marcus silently handed him the letter, its paper worn as if read multiple times. Darius recognized Kira's handwriting immediately, and his hands trembled as he absorbed her words. Each sentence carved deeper into his chest until he could barely breathe. "How long?" His voice came out as a growl. 3 days ago," Marcus answered quietly. The attack stopped the very next morning. Darius crushed the letter in his fist, his alpha power crackling through the air like lightning. "Vance!" he snarled, already striding toward the council chambers where he knew his rival would be holding court. He found Vance surrounded by advisors, playing his role of concerned ally perfectly. The room fell silent as Darius entered, his rage barely contained. "What did you do?" Darius demanded, his voice deadly quiet. Vance raised an eyebrow, the picture of innocence. "My king, I've done nothing but support your reign, as evidenced by the sudden peace at our borders, peace that arrived just as certain distractions were removed." "You threatened her." Darius stepped closer, his wolf clawing to break free. "Careful, my king," Vance smiled, gesturing to the witnesses around them. Making accusations without proof could be seen as unstable, especially given recent concerns about your judgment. Darius's jaw clenched. He couldn't reveal Kira's Lumina heritage or the true nature of the attacks without exposing sensitive information to potential enemies. Vance had played his hand perfectly, and they both knew it. "The peace won't last," Darius warned. "Perhaps," Vance agreed smoothly, "but at least now you can face any threats as a proper Alpha King should, without weakness." Miles away, in a mist-shrouded valley untouched by time, Kira knelt in the ruins of an ancient Lumina temple. Her grief had led her here, drawn by instincts she didn't understand. Crumbling stone walls still hummed with old magic, responding to her presence. Her pain, rather than destroying her, had broken through the last barriers holding back her power. Energy coursed through her veins like liquid moonlight, no longer fighting to break free but flowing naturally as breath. In her solitude, surrounded by the echoes of her ancestors, Kira finally embraced what she truly was. The transformation wasn't physical. She still couldn't shift into wolf form, but something deeper. Her consciousness expanded outward like ripples in a pond, touching the minds and hearts of every wolf within hundreds of miles. Their emotions washed over her: joy, fear, anger, love, ambition, hatred. Through this new awareness, she sensed the deception in the recent peace. Behind the calm surface roiled darkness, hundreds of minds connected in secret, plotting, preparing. The attacks hadn't truly stopped. They had merely paused while something much larger took shape. Kira's eyes snapped open, glowing with ancient power. The coalition Vance had mentioned wasn't just a few disgruntled alphas. It was an army, gathering in shadows, waiting to strike at the heart of the kingdom. Their minds burned with purpose, unified by someone's controlling influence, someone whose presence she couldn't quite grasp. Back at the palace, Darius stood at his chamber window, staring at the moon. The mate bond ached in his chest, a constant reminder of Kira's absence. He touched the crumpled letter in his pocket, her words haunting him. "Our love has become a weapon used against your kingdom." A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus entered with fresh intelligence reports. "The border packs report unusual quiet," Marcus said. "Too quiet. No pack movements, no hunting parties, not even normal territorial patrols." "They're planning something bigger," Darius replied, his tactical mind already working despite his heartache. "This peace is just for show." "Yes," Marcus agreed, "but without proof. Any aggressive moves on our part will seem like paranoid overreaction." Exactly what Vance wants. Darius turned from the window, his eyes hard with determination. "Then we prepare in secret. Double the palace guards but keep them hidden. Send scouts beyond our usual territories. And Marcus?" He paused. "Find out everything you can about the ancient Lumina temples. Something tells me they're more important than we realized." Through the ancient stones of the Lumina temple, Kira's enhanced senses suddenly blazed with warning. The emotional landscape she'd been monitoring shifted dramatically, like storm clouds gathering before a tempest. What had been careful, hidden preparation exploded into focused aggression, hundreds of minds moving with unnatural synchronization. But something was wrong with these wolves. Their emotional signatures felt twisted, corrupted, as if their very essence had been altered. Kira pressed deeper with her newfound abilities, and the truth hit her like a physical blow. These weren't just angry or rebellious wolves. They had been changed at their core, their natural pack bonds severed and replaced with something dark and artificial. "By the moon!" she whispered, her voice echoing in the empty temple. "They're using dark magic to turn our own kind against us." The realization struck harder than any physical blow. This wasn't about her relationship with Darius or even simple power politics. This was an attempt to destroy the entire foundation of werewolf society. The coalition wasn't just fighting for control. They were trying to remake the world by corrupting the very nature of what it meant to be a wolf. Kira scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. The massive force was already moving, their target clear in their unified minds. The Crystal Palace. Hundreds of corrupted wolves, former pack members twisted into weapons, all focused on a single devastating assault. "Darius!" she gasped and started running. She had to warn him, had to reach him somehow. The capital was too far to reach on foot, but perhaps her new abilities could bridge the gap. Focusing her power, Kira tried to project her awareness toward the palace, searching for any mind she could trust with her warning. She found Marcus's familiar presence and pushed with all her might to make contact. For a brief moment, she felt the connection form, began to transmit the desperate warning. But then something dark and cold slammed between them, cutting off the contact. Through the lingering connection, she caught a glimpse of Vance standing near Marcus, his eyes glowing with unnatural power. He turned, seeming to look directly at her across the magical link, and smiled. At the Crystal Palace, the first wave of attack came without warning. Corrupted wolves burst from hidden positions throughout the city, their eyes glowing with an eerie purple light that marked the dark magic controlling them. Palace guards fell before they could even raise the alarm, their training useless against former packmates they hesitated to harm. Darius was in his war room when the sounds of battle reached him. Before he could rally his forces, Vance stepped through the door, flanked by guards who should have been loyal to the crown. "I had such hopes you'd be a weak king," Vance said, his voice dripping with false regret. "The Omega scandal would have been enough to topple you slowly, legitimately. But you proved surprisingly resilient, so we had to accelerate our plans." "We?" Darius demanded, his alpha power rising even as he assessed the tactical situation. More sounds of fighting echoed through the palace halls. Vance's smile turned cruel. "Did you think a few disgruntled alphas were your only problem? I've spent years building this coalition, gathering those who understand that the old ways of pack hierarchy must be destroyed, and now I have an army that can't be swayed by loyalty or honor because I've burned those weaknesses out of them." The full scope of the conspiracy hit Darius like a physical blow. This wasn't a power grab or a coup. It was an attempt to fundamentally change their entire society. The border attacks, the political pressure about Kira, even the peace treaty, all of it had been orchestrated to position pieces for this final assault. Through the windows, Darius could see more corrupted wolves pouring into the palace grounds. His defenders were falling back, overwhelmed by the savagery of former friends and packmates. The palace defenses, designed to resist normal military attacks, were crumbling against an enemy that knew every weakness from the inside. As he drew his ceremonial sword, Darius felt the weight of understanding settle over him. They were facing enemies on every side, betrayal from within matched by overwhelming force from without. And somewhere out there was Kira, the only person whose Lumina powers might be able to counter this dark magic, if she still lived. "Your armies are impressive," Darius said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "But you've made one crucial mistake, Vance." "Oh?" Vance raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "And what's that?" "You've revealed yourself too soon. A true alpha never shows his full hand until victory is certain." Before Vance could respond, Darius unleashed his full alpha power, shattering the windows and sending Vance's corrupted guards staggering backward. The battle for the Crystal Palace and the future of all werewolves had begun. Kira burst through the palace gates, her Lumina power blazing like starlight around her. The sight before her made her heart clench. Corrupted wolves with purple-tinged eyes fought against palace guards, while others lay wounded or unconscious across the courtyard. Through their shared bond, she felt Darius's presence above, fighting for his life in the throne room. Her newfound powers surged as she witnessed the corruption firsthand. The dark magic pulsed visibly through the attacking wolves like poison in their veins. Without hesitation, Kira reached out with her abilities, connecting to the nearest corrupted wolf. Pure white light flowed from her hands, enveloping the snarling creature. The purple taint in its eyes flickered and died, replaced by natural wolf gold. The freed wolf stumbled, shaking its head in confusion before recognizing its surroundings with horror. "I can save them," Kira whispered, hope and determination warring with the strain she already felt from using such powerful magic. She pushed forward, purifying more corrupted wolves as she fought her way toward Darius. Each cleansing pulled at her essence, threatening to draw her deeper into the ancient magic. Her vision began to blur, reality mixing with glimpses of ancient memories that weren't her own. Countless Lumina wolves throughout history, wielding the same power until it consumed them completely. Darius's voice cut through her haze. "Kira!" He was fighting through Vance's guards, his alpha power radiating like a beacon. Their eyes met across the chaos, and their bond sang with renewed strength. Vance stood between them, his face twisted with rage. "Kill them both!" he commanded, but Kira's power had already freed too many of his puppets. The corrupted wolves still under his control hesitated, their programming fighting against their natural instincts. "Your dark magic can't stand against true pack bonds," Darius declared, his voice carrying the weight of alpha command, or against the power of the Lumina. Kira felt the ancient magic rising within her, threatening to sweep away her identity in its tide. She could purify all the remaining corrupted wolves at once, but the cost might be her very self. The power wanted to use her as a conduit, to flow unchecked through her body and soul. Kira. Darius reached for her hand, his touch anchoring her to reality. Remember who you are. Remember us. Their fingers intertwined, and Kira felt their mate bond pulse with strength and love. Using that connection as her anchor, she unleashed the full force of her Lumina heritage. Brilliant white light exploded outward, washing over friend and foe alike. Where it touched corrupted wolves, the dark magic shriveled and died, leaving them gasping but free. Vance screamed as his magical control shattered, but Kira barely heard him. She was drowning in power, losing herself in the vast ocean of ancient magic. Only Darius's grip on her hand, his love flowing through their bond, kept her from disappearing completely into the light. The blinding light slowly faded, leaving Kira swaying in Darius's arms. Her eyes, when they opened, held a new depth, ancient wisdom tempered by modern compassion. The mate bond between them pulsed stronger than ever, having weathered the storm of power that could have torn her away. "You kept me anchored," she whispered, touching his face with trembling fingers. "I felt myself slipping into the ancient memories, becoming pure power. But your love brought me back." Around them, the aftermath of battle revealed a changed landscape. Freed wolves were reuniting with their pack members, tears flowing as they recognized what they'd been forced to do under Vance's corruption. The former conspirator himself lay unconscious, his dark magic shattered by Lumina light. Darius stood tall, still holding Kira's hand, and addressed the gathered wolves. "Today marks the end of the old ways." His voice carried across the courtyard. "We've seen true strength in an Omega who chose to protect rather than dominate. My mate." He squeezed Kira's hand, making their relationship public for the first time. "Has shown us that power comes from compassion, not cruelty." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but none dared challenge them. The evidence of Kira's power and sacrifice was too clear, and the freed wolves were already spreading tales of how her light had saved them from darkness. In the days that followed, Darius issued new proclamations. The laws protecting pack hierarchy were rewritten, with specific protections for Omegas and outcasts. "No wolf will be judged solely by their rank," he declared, "but by their actions and character." Kira, growing into her role as future queen, established a new order of Lumina guardians. "We will train those with the gift to protect, not to rule," she explained to the council. "Never again will dark magic corrupt our people while we stand watch." The packs that had been torn apart by Vance's manipulation began healing. Corrupted wolves were welcomed home with open arms, their actions under his control forgiven. The purple taint in their eyes was replaced by tears of gratitude as families reunited. 1 month later, Kira and Darius stood together for their coronation as joint rulers. The ceremony was different from his first crowning, less about pomp and more about promise. The same ballroom that had once witnessed Kira's intended humiliation now celebrated her triumph. "From this day forward," they proclaimed together, "the worth of a wolf will be measured by their heart, not their rank. Let our kingdom be known not for its strength alone, but for its justice and compassion." As they turned to face their people, Kira wore the same simple dress from that first night, now adorned with symbols of her Lumina heritage. What had begun as a cruel joke had transformed into a revolution of the heart, reshaping werewolf society into something stronger and more equitable than ever before. If today's story echoed in your heart, I hope you'll stick around. Subscribe, and I'll be here again tomorrow with another story that speaks softly but stays deeply.